Um, this is Marilyn and Sherry, and they're going to lead a session. And we were figuring out technology, and so hopefully it's figured out. And I'm going to get a charger for the phone. But yeah, they'll take over, and it'll be great. Yes. Thank you.
All right. So those of you who have been here the last 2 days probably already, no doubt, you already heard kind of what is trauma healing. But for those of you who weren't here, I'm going to do a little quick summary about that. So when we think about trauma, we're not thinking about the event that happened. We're thinking more about the effect on the person, because experiences affect people differently, depending on a whole bunch of different factors: personality, what you've experienced in the past, all of those kinds of things. But when we think about trauma, we think about something that is kind of, it changes your life so that it divides your life into the before and the after. It's something that is a difficult enough experience that your life is never the same. So the program that we do for trauma healing helps people who have experienced difficult things, whether trauma or not. But we want people to understand that trauma is different than just normal grief or loss, right? It's something that affects your entire person, your physical, spiritual, emotional, and your relationships. So when people are traumatized, they tend to withdraw into themselves, or their effects of the trauma are so dramatic that it affects the relationship that they have with God, and it affects their relationships with other people. So in trauma healing, what we are trying to do is to help people process the pain of the experience that they've had. And we do that through a process. It's trauma, the effects are so extensive that it's not just a one-time kind of one and done thing. But this process can help people at least begin to heal from the trauma that they've experienced. One of the things that people coming into trauma often have is a lack of understanding of what's happening to them. And often they may be blaming God for what's happened. One of the largest questions of humankind from the very beginning is, why is there suffering in the world? And how does that relate to God? And so we start with talking about, if God loves us, why do we suffer? And how did suffering come into the world? And then we talk about the characteristics of God and a relationship with God, just so people can have kind of that better way of framing it. And often that makes a difference in their perspective on what they've gone through. Then we talk about the comparison between a physical wound and a heart wound, to help people kind of conceptualize that it's similar in a lot of ways in terms of needing care, it taking a long time, might leave a scar, those kinds of things, so that people can start to conceptualize it. Because for a lot of people, they may have heard the term trauma, but not really understand kind of what goes with that. And we tend to talk about trauma like heart wound, just as a comparison, right? And then people kind of get that idea of the similarity. So the first step then is helping with some understanding. If people are not Christians, or they don't have a lot of trust in the Bible, we don't typically start with the first lesson, because sometimes people kind of react to that, or they don't engage with the process. And so often we'll start with talking about heart wounds and that comparison, and then we move to being heard. So talking about your trauma, expressing the pain is an important aspect of healing, as is the connection between people. So we really focus also on creating a safe space in the group where people can feel comfortable sharing their experience and how it affected them. We teach people how to listen, and we have some little, if you missed the session yesterday, I've got some bookmarks here that talk about being a safe listener, right, for people. Then we move to lamenting, using scripture as a model of how we can express our pain to God. And then we have
Well, you left out grieving. We did that on purpose, right?
No,
Because that's what we're going to talk about today.
Oh, yeah. I thought you did space there. Yes. So today we're going to talk about the grieving process. I wondered why I had a big space there. I was trying to focus on technology. Anyway, and so the grieving, having people understand the grieving process is something that's really important, especially Christians who think they should never grieve, right? Rejoice in the Lord always. So why are you not happy? Why are you not engaged, right? And so understanding the grieving process is actually one of the most impactful things for many, many participants. So once we understand that and we lament, we bring the pain to God. And after people have started going through this process of connecting with other people, expressing their pain, then they might be able to start thinking about forgiveness. And so often when people are really hurting, they can't even think about forgiveness, right? And they don't really understand what it means. Sometimes they think it means they have to reconnect with the person who hurt them, right? And so we help them kind of sort all that out in order to be able to forgive in a way that really heals. And after that comes continuing to restore your life. During this process, we've taught people some tools that can help them when they face the next difficult thing in their life. And now that they're freer to connect with other people and to relate to God, their life can continue to be restored. And ultimately, they develop resilience for the next thing that they're going to experience. So all of this process is really what we focus on in the healing group. And we talk about at the end how God uses suffering in your life. So that, and we leave people with an understanding that God can use the hard things that you've gone through, that nothing is wasted with God, so that you can move forward and continue to build your life. So when someone is grieving, it helps to identify what are all the things that I have lost during this difficult experience. So if I was robbed at gunpoint, right, I've not only lost whatever they took from me, I've lost my sense of safety and security. I may have lost the respect of other people. I may have lost, there's a number of different things that can result from any experience. If I'm in an accident and I lose the use of my arm, I may end up losing my ability to keep a job. I may lose even my sense of identity of who I am as a person. And so these losses need to be grieved and processed in order for us to restore our well-being in the world. And what we provide people, this whole program is intended to be a very simple process that you don't have to be a counselor or a therapist. In fact, we explicitly say we are not therapists. We are training people to use some basic tools in order to help themselves and others to thrive, right? And so we define this grief process in kind of a simple way. If you have studied psychology or are familiar with different ways of describing grief, you may think, well, it's a 7-step process and that's XYZ, right? Or it's a 5-step process or whatever. We have really simplified this and created a graphic around it so that people can understand it who maybe don't have a lot of education or don't have a lot of background in mental health. So that's what we're going to talk about now.
Okay, so grieving is a journey. And it's a normal journey because we all grieve over different things, like we suggested. Okay, so we've just simplified this into 3, well, in Africa, it was 3 villages. Here it's 3 neighborhoods. Okay, so you have denial and anger. And well, like the time doesn't matter that much, except we talked about being angry and how in the world is God going to handle that? Can we have a relationship with God when we're angry and denying what's happened? Well, that's where we have to go on and find out what God is trying to do with us. All right. He still loves us and he will lead us to healing. This journey has helped a lot of people in Africa and around the world to really heal well. So we do want to remember that it takes time and energy. That's why we call it a journey. It doesn't happen right away. And I think all of you know that, but just to reiterate that. So if we allow ourselves to take the journey, it does help us heal. So, okay, denial and anger. What are some of the things you think you would feel when you're angry and denying that this even happened, this crisis? Ideas?
We doubt.
Yes. Doubt. You might be numb,
Yeah.
not even wanting to face the world.
So when we talk about denial and anger, we're sort of lumping two things into the same stage, right? You're not going to experience denial and anger at the same time, probably. You may experience denial for a bit, then it may hit you and then you're angry, right? And then you may lapse into denial again, right? But we've just lumped it into one neighborhood that
Yeah.
you're going to pass through.
Because it does seem to happen the first phase.
Mhm.
And people think denial can be really bad, and it is, but it's a normal process. So you don't have to say, oh, I'm denying this and I'm really bad. I don't want this to happen. But we do realize that sometimes denial helps you absorb it a little bit at a time, little by little. And so you don't get so overwhelmed by the whole thing. Okay, and even anger gives us energy. Might not be good energy, but it's energy that we can use to overcome and again, not be so overwhelmed. Okay, it's kind of fighting against the loss, that anger. Okay, and then no hope. Okay, that in itself is an emotion. When you're hopeless, you are in a really bad state, and they call this the blackest area because you're just feeling like, oh, what's the purpose in life? Why is there any reason to go on? So no help, no hope. And you feel like there's no help for you too. Okay, finally, we get to new beginnings. So because it's a journey though, you're gonna have times where you go back and forth. Oh, this is hopeless. You know, a memory comes up. And even if you got to new beginnings, it's just, there's nothing, no purpose. Why am I still here? You know, so back to no hope or down to anger. Oh, that person that stole my, whatever it was at gunpoint, you know, I'm so angry. The anniversary comes around and, oh, this is the day it happened. I'm angry again. So it's back and forth. It's a journey. We're all on a journey at different stages. So you want to go and take the rest of it?
Great. So now we'd like to demonstrate the journey a little bit. So I'm debating whether we could do it with as many, whether we should have representatives or I think maybe everybody can come down and do this whole process.
Why don't you all come down here? Oh. Yep. You put them all there.
Okay, you're gonna be getting something.
Okay. Beginnings over here.
All right.
Oh, we all lined up.
Conform to the pattern.
Okay. There's tape here that you can, and some phrases that might occur to people when they are in this particular stage. So you're welcome to take one of these little phrases and read it out loud to the rest of the group and then put it under the space. So what we're going to do is we're going to imagine something disastrous that has happened to you. So for example, you were in a terrible car accident. We did a dramatization about that the other day, right? And so if you, shortly after it happens, say your husband and daughter are still in the hospital, right? And so your initial reaction in this village or neighborhood of denial and anger might be what?
You know, I'll switch with you. Got a husband. There you go.
Oh, yeah, I've been there, I would have stopped.
Okay, so looking for a way to change what has happened, right? So that's kind of that denial and not really accepting it. So you want to take some tape and
Oh, yeah.
put your, just tape it up here under the, your head.
Read it out to us.
If only I had been there, I could have stopped it.
Good drama.
How many times have you felt that way when you've lost something? Like, I could have changed it if only, right? Okay.
I can't stop crying.
Why did this happen to me?
How often have we said that and said it to God sometimes, right? Could be angry at ourselves, could be angry at other people, could be angry at God.
How could God let this happen? I just want to scream and break something.
I wish I hadn't left that morning. None of this would have happened.
Glory long ladies.
Yes.
I still see my sister alive and talking to me in my dreams almost every night.
I'm so angry at my husband for dying. How could he leave me all alone?
So understanding that these things are normal can really help people to accept where they are and how it's affecting them.
I feel completely numb. People keep talking to me, but it's all a blur. I don't feel connected to anything and anyone around me.
It's my wife's fault. Our son died. Why was she watching him? How could she be so stupid? I hate it.
You know, people tend to think of suicide as something that happens in a depressed state, and it's true, it does. But it can also happen in this village of denial and anger. People can sometimes have the energy to actually do something about it and commit suicide to punish other people, right? So it's actually a little bit more likely to occur in this phase than it is in that depressed state where people are just totally out of energy.
Wow.
Okay, so from this village, I don't know if there's even space to come on, so come on down and we'll go on to the next village. Typically, denial and anger, all of these phases differ depending on the depth of the grief and depending on the personality. But typically, denial and anger would last no more than 1 or 2 months. And then you move on to a neighborhood of no hope. Come on around.
Okay, who didn't get to do the
Do we go from one neighborhood to the next?
Yeah.
Here, Aaron. Got it.
Yeah, please.
There, I got 2 more. There you go.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. There you go. Yep. All right. So what might we feel or think or say when we're in this neighborhood of no hope?
I don't see any end to this sadness. I can't imagine ever being happy again. I'm so alone in this. No one understands or cares about me anymore.
Everything has gone wrong and I feel so guilty. This must be my fault somehow.
I'm so lonely. My heart anxious for my husband to come back. Life is so empty without him.
My life has no purpose now. I don't see any reason to get out of bed.
I can't keep track of anything anymore. The bills, the laundry, cooking, appointments, it's all so overwhelming.
Life is only full of pain now. I wish my life were over. It would be such a relief.
So you can imagine kind of what that feels like to be in that point. You've probably been there yourself at some point and may have thought some of these things or felt some of these things. What can happen even while in this second stage is, you two come over here. Okay, is suddenly they have a reminder of something that angers them, right? Maybe they needed their husband to walk their daughter down the aisle. He's no longer there, right? Okay, anger might reoccur, so then they're going to come back to this other village. and stay there for a while. Generally, they're not there as long as they were the first time, right? But they do have to process and experience those feelings again before they can move back to feeling hopeless, right? So doesn't feel like progress, but it is, right? Because they're moving along this process. Eventually, so you can come back here, all right? So you're back feeling hopeless. But eventually people start to regain a new sense of purpose, a new sense of at least being willing to move ahead from this hopeless phase. And so they come to the neighborhood of new beginnings.
Start with 6 people. Who want to be the 6 people?
Whoever.
New beginnings. That's right.
It felt so good to laugh tonight. I really enjoyed playing those games with my family.
I want to cherish and devote myself to things that really matters in life.
Things are different now, but I'm settling into this new rhythm. This is who I am, and I'm beginning to see beauty in life again.
So especially as we talked about with trauma, that your life is never going to be the same when a traumatic experience happens. There's something substantially different, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good life, right? So that's one of the things that needs to happen, is to be able to see some kind of future for yourself.
I feel like I've taken up a new hobby, or maybe I should start painting again. I used to enjoy that so much.
I think I'll check out that online dating website my friend has used. It would be nice to find someone to get married.
I think I'll go to that barbecue at my friend's house. It might feel good to spend some time with them.
All right. So it's wonderful to get there, but that doesn't mean you're going to stay there, right? What about the anniversary of a death? What happens then, right? You're going to come back to either no hope or anger and denial and have to work your way back. You don't necessarily have to go through both of them. You can come straight back from anger back to beginning your new life, right? So all of this is a process, and it's normal. It's not uncommon to stay in the neighborhood of no hope for 6 to 15 months, right? And maybe longer. But if somebody gets stuck in one of these phases for too long, if 2 years later somebody is unable to move beyond that, they may need additional help. It may not just be, they may just be stuck and need somebody who can help to kind of work them loose from this particular issue, help them process so that they can start to see some kind of future.
That's why there's a counseling program here.
That's right.
Yes. Comment. What is interesting about this process is, yesterday I was here and we talked about trauma. I feel like I really haven't had any traumatic experience. That's what I thought. But only when you started explaining what grieving is, then it made sense to me that I have experience. But when my sister died, that was a very traumatic. I went through denial, and I didn't know I was in denial until when my mom came to visit. I asked her how my sister was.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I broke down. So when you expect, like, oh my goodness, I didn't go through this. And that's how I came to know the Lord. So it's a really before and after. But now, because I'm healed and I'm like, no, I didn't have any trauma. But grieving,
Right.
grieving part made me understand that, yes, it was traumatic.
Yeah, right. So this process can apply to a small loss, and it may be a quick process, right? But it can apply to something like the loss of your sister, and it may take a long time.
But you're right. We talked a little bit about how we can grieve and it not be traumatic. Like when my mom died, she was older. She, we knew that she was gonna, I think Marilyn mentioned her grandma or something. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So that she's gonna show the circles. Yes. When we have traumatic event, we do have grief and loss. We don't always, when we're grieving, we don't always have trauma. Someone that's expected to, to go home to heaven soon or whatever. Or you may, or that person may be sick so long that you've already grieved before they go.
Gotcha.
So,
So some of the effects of trauma are a sense of intense fear, helplessness, and horror, right? So maybe not all three, but those are typical when somebody has experienced trauma. But you can have deep grief without having that trauma. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Questions, comments? Yes.
So you were talking about like how, like, say the anniversary of a death comes and you go back through that cycle again. How many, I guess it's different for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But like, is there a normal amount of years for it to take you back again? You know what I'm saying?
I do know. Yeah.
Good.
No.
no,
So, for example, I was doing a healing group in Honduras, and there was a woman there who had lost a child.
Okay.
His room was intact 10 years later, right? She had not been able to move on. And understanding this process and the normal to experience that and to start to accept and to share some of that pain helped her to process it to where the next week she started cleaning out her son's room. Right. So those kinds of things are really a huge blessing for us to see that this can make a dramatic impact for people to just understand what has happened to them and how can they go on and have a good life, right? In spite of the circumstances around them, in spite of the loss that they've experienced.
we actually were asking Karen, actually, one of the gals on our team, actually being supervisor for a lot of us, is an actual counselor. Got her degree through, I think, here, was it at DTS? Anyway, I can't remember now, but she said she had just gone to another seminar where they just kind of said, oh, the standards of how many years, it's so different for everybody that they said, kind of throw them out, you know? It's just this, where God made it all so unique.
Yeah.
That it's so hard to put a date on when you're gonna be better.
Right.
So,
But at the same time, you kind of mentioned you have to be able to recognize when someone may need additional help, right?
Yes.
Not just kind of leave them.
yeah,
Right.
in the neighborhood.
Yeah. So approaching people and helping them to talk about what has happened to them can really be helpful. I think often we don't want to say the wrong thing, right? So people tend to kind of shy away from other people who might be in denial and anger or in a sense of no hope. What am I gonna say? And might I make it worse, right? But the isolation is part of what keeps them stuck. And so just going and being with them and inviting them to talk, it can really be helpful. You don't have to say anything, really. The companionship, the compassion that you feel for them can really make a difference. And they're not going to feel it from a distance, right? So you may feel really sad for them and do nothing because you're scared you're going to do the wrong thing. That's not the right response, right? If we want to help other people. So one other suggestion I will give, when somebody is in denial and anger or in the pit of despair, saying, what can I do? I'm here for you. Just tell me how I can help. Most of the time, they don't have any idea, right? So we need to be the ones to kind of suggest, let me take care of your kids. Let me clean your house. Let me bring you a meal. You know, those kinds of things, to suggest something specific and see if they're comfortable with that. So you don't want to push it on them. I might not want somebody to come and see how messy my house is, right? That may like add to my trauma. So but suggesting something can be helpful.
How about in cases where you're far away? How do you help?
Letting them know that you're thinking about them, maybe having a conversation on WhatsApp, right? Some of those kinds of things, and continuing to check in. So right after a significant loss, people have others around them who probably sharing the experience. But within a couple of months, that tends to drop off, right? So one thing that I've done is put on my calendar when the people I care about have lost someone and realizing, okay, she's probably thinking about that today. Just write a message saying, I remember your mom. And maybe even giving a little example, something that you remember that was a sweet memory.
WhatsApp has been great.
Yeah.
You can keep up with people on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
You know what's good about that is like, so I've like experienced a lot of loss during the pandemic, and I purposely forgot the dates.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm not gonna, like have this gloomy,
Yeah.
what I mean, gloomy thing over
Yeah.
me. Yeah. And my body remembered.
Wow.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like the week of, and it was so many deaths that it just was like cyclical. But the week of, I'm just in the bed, zonked. And you know what I mean? And just really feeling in the depths of despair, but not even understanding why.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I was tired. I don't know. And just being really, and one of my friends was telling me like she remembered after the fact. So she was, you know what I mean? Just popping up and stopping over. And then like she told me after the fact, and I was like, it was the anniversary of Tiffany's death. She was like, I know. And I'm like, I didn't know.
Right. But your body, your heart knew.
Yeah, my
right?
heart knew. And my friend remembered. It was amazing.
Yeah. That's great.
That's great.
Yeah.
And we have a friend that she miscarried in month 7, and it was a huge grief to her.
Oh,
A year later, on the exact same day, she ended up in the hospital with a problem related to that. And her father's response was, I can't believe God is doing this to us. And exactly on the day later, because they didn't understand trauma and they didn't understand the physical effects. They came about trauma and also take weight off God and put it onto just how He made it as heart, soul, and mind and emotions. All connected.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. That it brings to mind the verse that says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, mind, and strength, right? And so understanding that how trauma affects us and that it can create a barrier and it can cause us to shut down can really help us to open up to being able to love God in all those ways. And then the second commandment, love others as yourself. How can you do that when you're overwhelmed? When you're experiencing all the effects of trauma. All right, you can go back to your seats and we're going
Thank
to
you
talk
for
about-
your.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so we talked about grieving and mentioned lamenting. Okay, I'm sure you Bible scholars will know that David wrote a lot of the Psalms, and 67 of those 150 are laments. So almost a third, just still a lot of lamenting. So, okay, what is a lament? Okay, it's a way of expressing our pain to God. It's like a prayer, really. You're talking to God about what you feel. And so it makes it very powerful. It's a powerful prayer because you're expressing your feelings, your emotions, any actions that go along with those. But God can handle it. We all know God can handle it. And so if we're honest about what we're feeling, what's going on inside us, then we cry out to God with a lament. And again, it can be with words, music, dancing, all these different cultures we have in this world do lamenting different ways. So, and yesterday we did a drawing. Okay, that's another way of just getting your feelings out to God. So we want to have you have this exercise of doing it. I'm going to read Psalm 13. Well, should we give him the paper? I'll just read it. Okay. And then the steps are just, you're calling out to God. You tell him about your pain, your emotions, your feelings, anything goes along with that. And other things you can add to that, of course. Just telling about your pain is the main thing, though. Asking God for help is usually what David did after that. Doesn't say you have to, but if you can, asking God for help, as he always will. We know that. And then maybe affirming your trust in God at the end. But if you're not there, it's okay. Just tell him what you need to tell him, your feelings, all your emotions, your deep heart for what's going on. Okay, so here's Psalm 13. How much longer will you forget me, Lord? Forever? He's calling out to God. Then, how much longer will you hide yourself from me? How long must I endure trouble? How long will sorrow fill my heart day and night? How long will my enemies triumph over me? Look at me, oh Lord. Okay, he's crying out to God. All these questions. We can tell God our questions and he knows how to handle them. So then he looked back and he's asking God for help. Look at me, oh Lord my God, and answer me. Restore my strength. Don't let me die. Don't let my enemies say, we have defeated him. Don't let them gloat over my downfall. So then he goes on at the end of Psalm 13, showing his trust in God. I will rely on your constant love. I will be glad because you will rescue me. I will sing to you, Lord, because you have been good to me. And we all know that, but sometimes it's good to just write it down and remind ourselves. So, okay. So the back of what I just read has space for you to write. So we're going to give you, let's see. Oh, this goes till 10, right? Yeah. Okay, so 10 minutes? I think you need at least 10 minutes. Longer is better. So just go ahead and lament to God.
I have extra paper if you have more words.
Yes, we do have extra.
You may be part of a faith tradition that says you can't complain to God. You should never criticize God. You should never, express those kinds of strong feelings or doubts. And the examples of scripture can really help us to see that God's okay with that, right? David was called a man after God's own heart, and he did a lot of complaining, a lot of saying why, a lot of come and help me, right? And so that helps to reassure us that we are free to do that with God, and that God wants us to come near to him and express ourselves to him.
Your anger cannot hurt God's feelings. So there you are.
Those of you that are online, you should have received the lament leaflet in the chat, and you can access it that way for you to do it yourselves.
Okay, yesterday we did pairs. Some of you are new, some are different. If you have a partner, please find someone and get into pairs and talk about your lament. You don't have to share it. You could share just how the experience was for you. You could share as little or as much as you want. Find someone to just share what the experience was like or about the lament. Because it's between you and God.
So our time is up. We're still here if you want to talk about any of this.